We can start.
Other will join.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening.
From India.
Good evening from India. Exactly. Good evening from India to all distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Let me extend a very hearty welcome to all of you in this session of Smart Grid, Smart City, Smart Mobility, and Sustainable Hydropower. It is also my pleasure to welcome our distinguished panel of experts. Mr. Ravi Sitapati from Canada, Mr. Campbell from United Kingdom, Dr. Garg, is Mr. Dhital coming in the thing from the Nepal. Please put your mic on.
Dr. Wolfgang has joined from United States, Michigan State University.
Okay. So I welcome all the distinguished experts in the panel. Before coming to this session, I was consulting a dictionary to know the precise definition of smart. What I have come to the conclusion that though this term is defined in different ways because of different contexts, but for this context, what we can define it as an intelligent way to think quickly and appropriately to find solution of difficult situations. This comes to our common sense definition of smart, to do things cleverly and effectively. And when you look around our crowded cities, our crazy transport system, our healthcare facility, or the heaps of garbage on the corner of the road, or the energy supply system, then we really look forward for an amicable solution, a solution that gives us a dignified way of living and assure us of a life of our children and their children also. If you see human enhancement, it is at least as old as the human civilization. From time immemorial, efforts are being made to ameliorate the sufferings of people and to give them a better way of life. Thanks to the development of science and technology, thanks to the technological breakthroughs, along with omnipresent, what they call the ubiquitous information and communication technology. Now we are at the doorstep of a human enhancement revolution. So, in a smart city, what we are going to discuss, it is essentially a common enabler of various things: smart mobility, smart healthcare system, smart education, smart economy, smart governance. And we want to have this concept, especially in the context of now COVID-19. It has seen us very clearly that globally we are so much interconnected. And it has revealed many fault lines of our continuing civilization. So I believe when you are talking about smart city and other smart aspects of living, we need to do a very clear and courageous planning so that we can come up with a solution. That solution gives us a better way of living. So we are, as we are telling, we have distinguished panelists with us. And now let me invite Mr. Shitapati to give his views because he has vast experience in the connected systems. And Mr. Shitapati, we are looking forward to listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, President Mr. Anil Garg, distinguished panelists and attendees. It's my privilege. In fact, my connection with India goes into several other associations that I have, including being a board of a public listed company there. And so I am very well aware of the pain points, the challenges, and the enormous solutions that India does find on its own to solve its own problems. So I am in full agreement, Mr. Chair, with your opening remarks that it is humanity, that technology should enable us to lead better lives. And in there, I will also include climate change, the recent pandemics, as I talk about just key items in all the three areas of our current session, which is smart grid, smart city, and smart mobility. I think India stands currently at a crossroad. We are all looking for a reviving economy, which means more energy consumption, hopefully clean energy consumption. So that would be one because India is largely coal-based. Second is the large migration to cities in search of jobs. And that means we have a kind of a transportation issue, a clean transportation issue, rising pollution, and also the high density. And I'll talk about the high density issues that are coming up, which I think we need some level of rethinking in smart cities. The third is a climate change impact. We are seeing flash floods, flash fires, and we are seeing common mode problems, if you will. The human beings are suffering from common mode problems, largely as a result of nature turning against us because we had turned against nature in the last 100 years. Now, technology is not the solution necessarily, but as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, I think it's playing a very good role in solving complex interrelated problems. And I think that is where I think my examples hopefully should lead to some discussion today, because many technologies that exist today did not exist 10 years ago. They're solving very complex problems in real time, and they are hopefully addressing the human part of our issues as we look to quality of life and hopefully a stable future for our children. And in this, there's an intense digitalization that's taking place. So whether we like it or not, we are going to move into that world, whether we come willingly or we come kicking and screaming. So in the points that I'm going to talk about, I hold no crystal ball to several, but having been involved in several cases here globally as well, I wish to be able to sort of stick my neck out, if you will, and through that discuss, hopefully, and have a good discussion on why I think this is important. The first is, I think, is energy storage would have to be made almost equivalent in its bankability to renewable energy. Renewable energy, wind and PVs have made a great stride over the last decade. It has gone beyond the expectations in terms of what it can do, in what it can do in terms of cost, in terms of bankability, in very quick execution. India has got a very, very ambitious program in the area of wind and PV. I was involved, in fact, in the rooftop estimation of energy storage for the country last year. And if the market for energy storage has to grow, my view is it better fall in line with all the good learnings of the wind and the PV industry from a bankability perspective. And that means a lot of things have to change in the vendor community. Data transparency is not there. There is no standardized test, despite all the efforts that we have done in the IEEE environment. Everybody does their own. There is no disclosure on failures. We had 19 failures of battery systems in the world just last year. And there's not one iota of public disclosure in terms of what actually went wrong. I was involved, in fact, in anecdotal corrections for the Global Smart Grid Federation in the United States. But there is no official record of what happened because they're considered as proprietary information. And there's a tendency to group chemistries into good, bad, and ugly. And I will tell you that that is not likely to happen. In fact, we are seeing more and more evidence that that is not happening. So the first is the trend in the grouping of chemistries. I mean, in the old days, 2010, if you will, LFP was the dominant chemistry. In 2015, MNC, or nickel manganese cobalt, became the dominant chemistry, largely as a result of push from the United States and others. But as of last year, we are seeing a move back to the LFP, even though it's traditionally not as good for mobility purposes, but it's pretty good, in my view, for stationary purposes. So in my recommendations to the SAARC country projects that I've done and for India and the climate, the hot climate that it serves, one needs to look at that fairly carefully before we discount it for weight and energy density, which may be the driving factors for mobility, but not necessarily for stationary power. The second is cooling, for a simplistic cooling, which is what had happened till last year. Now, most of the systems are going for sophisticated liquid cooling. In other words, they have come to recognize that temperature is the key aspect for battery management. We are seeing very premature failures. We are seeing bankability being reduced by several orders just because they do not manage temperature very well, which for India will be a very key criteria going forward. So it needs to look at the liquid cooling aspect, which means the systems get far more sophisticated relative to an air-cooled system. The state of charge was considered till last year. In fact, there's a study by DNVGL as of late. Well, the state of charge at the very low end and the very high end was considered sort of the weak spots. And so we did an 10% bottom to an 85% top as a kind of an operating range. But we are now finding that there are weaker spots in the middle itself, 60%, 70%, 55%, which we need to pay attention to. And these are very chemistry dependent and individual manufacturer dependent. So all of a sudden now what we thought was a grouping has now become very individual in quality, individual in brand, and individual in pricing structure. So we are going to see that also take place. The second aspect, I think, in the T&D and the energy world, I think was going to be drones, robotics, and AI. We in Canada have done a fair bit of work with General Dynamics and others. And remote inspections, unmanned inspections, breakdown inspections in power plants, complex power plants, and T&D substations are now being done by robots. We in our country, being large with low population, our travel time is 4 or 5 hours, sometimes in very bad weather. And therefore having these robots sleep at an unmanned large substation and then wake them up through remote controls and then making them do the walk, and they have learned to walk themselves. And so we have done one, in fact, for one of our generating stations in New Brunswick. Drones were the very first ones employed in the transmission line fly-throughs, and they have come up. And therefore, all these integrated sensors, which you will call as photographic, if you will, whether they be infrared, night cameras, thermal cameras, etc., are doing wonderful yeomanous work to convey to us what we otherwise would not be able to see if we just went there traveling all on our own. So in the case of New Brunswick Power, we had a major, a kind of a scenario where human beings couldn't enter the plant. We put an exclusion zone around it. And so the robot was used, in fact, for the first 20 days to go and look at things, to be able to be the eyes and ears to the operator when nobody was allowed to enter. So several examples, we can talk about that. Aerial firefighting has just come through. A wood pole was actually, a fire was put out using an aerial drone. And so that technology has come through. So, getting rid of snow from wind turbine blades, we use drones. And so drone technology is here to stay. And artificial intelligence is actually driving all this towards what I would consider as a future of maintenance. In the smart city area, I think we have two areas to discuss. One, I think, is a rethink on urban planning. The recent pandemic has shown us how not to build cities. Large cities tend to have congregated settings. We create institutions, we create high rises. Why? Because the high density brings us efficiency. But the pandemic has actually proved that wherever we had high density, we had the highest impact. Tall buildings today in downtown Toronto, downtown London, I hope, and Alex may want to talk about it, they're all sitting empty. They'll be the last ones to be occupied. So where is this thing going, right? And we need to really see, is this congregated setting of a smart city the right metrics? So in my view, the recent pandemic will tell us to limit people densities. So it may be okay to have a cluster of boroughs, a cluster of smaller towns connected through smart mobility, as opposed to congregating everything into high rises. So for a country like India, I think the future migration, the future build of cities would all have to be sort of rethought. I know 20 smart cities have already been sort of worked through, 200 more are to come. India is building a city almost every third year. The question is, what will those lives look like, from these kinds of pandemics? The third is, as we build cities, we are building more and more impervious covers, whether they are road, pavement, side streets, parking lots. And we are seeing more and more rainwater surface runoffs causing huge drainage stresses. So you need a set of parameters to say, what will that also look like? How will I make my outside cover less impervious so that the rainwater can actually go through? The second area, I think, is in the buildings and buildings material itself. We in Canada have done a fair bit of work. We are a cold climate, but we do use air conditioning. One is to reduce the use of Portland cement and concrete, because what you tend to do in smart cities is build up a huge accumulation of buildings using concrete, which emits 1 ton of carbon dioxide for 1 ton of material almost. And then over the next 40 years, we try to bring it through energy efficiency, clean maintenance, this, that. And so it never pays itself off. In my view, I don't think a smart city will ever pay itself off in terms of being carbon neutral for the first 20 years. So I don't know what we are trying to do. We are spending money up front and we are spending money at the back end as well. So I think we need to look at alternative forms like polymer concrete, steel buildings, polystyrene cladding, et cetera, et cetera. The second is to almost eliminate the use of glass walls. I know it has come there. It's a part of building code. Even in Canada, we have large glass walls with thermal insulated windows. UK and EU make some of the best windows. We import from there. But even then, they have a life of about 10 years. So the argon leaks from it or something happens, whereas the building stands for 40 years, 50 years. So the question is, why are we using a lower insulated sidewall when the building code says you just need 25, 30% coverage through window for natural sunlight? So I think that whole area of using glass wall, which is cheap, fast, would have to be almost sort of rethought. So as we decrease the CO2, it will also have its impact on materials production like steel, cement, petrochemical, and aluminum. And there's now a talk of course, the hydrogen used directly in this. So yesterday there was in fact a call with India, in fact, on the use of potential uses of hydrogen. EU has done a fair bit of work in demonstration plants, one in the UK, two in Germany, one in Canada. And the question is, how do we build these new materials or the old materials using new processes? Electric vehicles is here to stay, I think, in India, particularly because of rising pollution. And the question is, how do we accommodate it? And it would have to be done through very energy efficient systems, including charging, et cetera. And I'm not here to discuss the whole aspect, but it will have to be done. And part of it will have to be punitive rates for very non-efficient use. I think in the whole area of energy efficient appliances, we are not doing enough to be able to be punitive for those people who continue to waste energy through inefficient what I call appliances or processes. So with that, we'll move to the last point, which is smart mobility. In the smart mobility, I think we'll have two major newcomers. One is the whole use of autonomous vehicles and drone type of vehicles. We are already beginning to see there is a large experiment in downtown Toronto with Microsoft and Ola, where we have actually got parts of the side street using autonomous vehicles. It's here to stay. I mean, I never believed it till about 6 months ago, till I saw these workings. And it's amazing how they have eyes and ears. The vehicles can actually pretty well manage themselves if we allow them to. And the question is, when will we allow them to? And passenger drones, you would have heard of the Dubai experiment. It's already here. The lift from the city top to the airport top in terms of 2 and 4 people passengers. The second, of course, will be the continued increase, like the lithium cab companies of Bangalore, Ola, Uber, and Lyft. You're going to see more and more companies come in and expand their fleet, which means your personal vehicles will be standing reduced. Just to tell you that every one person who buys an electric vehicle, if you calculate the amount of fuel that they will displace, it's actually fairly shocking to the oil companies. With the amount of petroleum that you would displace by not having a petrol car. So as you decrease all this through convenience and sharing, you are going to see a significant dent on this. So that is one. The second is on charging. We were moving till 7 years ago with fixed gun style charging, which is wired with a pistol grip. We will be moving in the fleet side to catenary. In fact, Germany and Amsterdam and others have already moved to the catenary style of charging. But there is wireless charging, I think, that will be here to stay. So that will allow you far more flexibility. It may not be in your own property, it may be in a third-party property or on a side street. But I think the wireless charging is making extremely good progress so that it could become one of the mainstay changes in technology. Smaller batteries. In our work for Calcutta, we reduced the battery size by 2/3 on the public fleet that World Bank is now procuring. And we did it through a calculation that showed we don't need very large batteries as the West has when it does, fleet transport in the downtown areas. When you're traveling only 50, 60 kilometers a day, there's no need to put a 260 kilometer 3-ton battery and then provide all the charging infrastructure for it. So in the Calcutta experiment, we were able to prove that no upgrades were required. You could use the current standard codes and actually charge these vehicles relatively easily. So that progress and the project is moving on. As the battery banks costs fall, I think you're going to see EV charging through batteries. And that is the only way stress on the grid is going to be alleviated. So you're going to see non-peak charging to these battery banks. And then these battery banks at certain locations will in turn charge small EV batteries going forward. We did one for the Hooghly River when we were doing the Calcutta study to be able to charge or theoretically show that we had to charge these boats in 7 minutes by the time they embark or disembark. And we have been able to show that that is possible with a reasonable amount of investments, but not very expensive. So that is one. And the second would be LiDAR-based traffic. In Canada, we have done several cities, including we have done in 2 areas in the Boston area, where we are using LiDARs extensively, in fact, as opposed to cameras. Cameras require daytime, it requires lighting, it requires lots of data because it's very crystal, and there are privacy issues. Nobody wants to be seen filmed at various points on the street. So LiDAR takes away all those issues and gives you very pinpoint, critical, real-time speed, data, congestion, avoidance, everything. You'll be amazed to show you the results we have achieved in Kelowna, BC, in Quebec and others, where you can almost solve traffic accidents and prevent traffic accidents through signals to the new cars because they can take signals. So here is a cross section that's sending a signal to the autonomous vehicle or the new smart car saying, slow down your speed. You cannot come at this intersection at 50 kilometers an hour because somebody is crossing it. And so there are 2 levels of protection now, one from the car itself as they have manufactured, and the second is the overriding supervisory command that's coming from the cross section itself. So I think these are the areas that will come. Now the question is for India, how does it manage all this? I think in conclusion, there are 2 or 3 main challenges that India will have. First is the issue that low cost labor is a defense. And I think this would be a major reset for all policy thinkers in India who are betting on the fact that low labor cost is actually going to be a defense for India in terms of its economic revival. I would argue otherwise. I think it's going to be very difficult for India to continue to be on its low labor, sort of less skilled labor as a defense strategy for its economic revival. Technology will produce far more things far cheaply and efficiently than just low cost labor. And I think it's going to wait to be unleashed. And by the time it unleashes, it'll be too late perhaps to reskill India in the areas it requires. The second area, and I sit on one of the subsidiaries of Larsen & Toubro, which is a large EPC, export markets will actually now want this new technologies to be included in their services, whether it's EPC services, whether it is manufacturing services, whether it's O&M services. India cannot say that I will export, but I will do it at my standards. It will have to be to global standards. So I think India will need to come to grips with what the new skill set will look like. I think many domestic technology pathways, and India is very good in setting pathways simply because it aggregates. If you take the smart metering program and if you take the clean energy program, it's good on one side, it aggregates for economic low cost, but I think it will also have huge impacts when it resets and rethinks all this. And so it needs, I think there'll be a fair bit of resetting of thoughts that needs to take place at the government and the policy level, such that many of its companies or its public sector units would almost have to say, okay, I'm going to stop all this and I'm going to do all these new things. I will not get into what was considered yesterday. Utilities and discoms will have a lot of stranded assets as energy moves outside the regulatory regime. Indian discoms do not have IT capability at all. And in my own career in the 35 years in the electric utility that I served in, I saw how this transformation took place. Today, almost 50% of the critical assets of a utility lies in its IT systems. Whether it's OT or IT, they're all sort of information based. So India has very little capacity in managing these digital assets. And I've been telling repeatedly that utilities need to skill in this area. They don't even have an IT department in many of the discoms, let alone doing anything meaningful. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to stop. And later on, perhaps if there are any questions, we'll be glad to answer some thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Shitapati, for pointing out some of the things which are very relevant for India. You were talking about storage. We are certainly working on that, and you know that's the international work going on. But we have also taken one more initiative, one sun, one world, one grid, so that we can take care of we can take advantage of the different time zones of when sun is available and wind speeds are different in the total grid. It is an initiative which has been started by the government, and we are going very steadily to do things. But obviously it requires international cooperation. And as you were also pointing out, COVID has given us that dictum that we are to work together. That's the only way we can survive. Now, may I request Mr. Alex Campbell, who is from the International Hydro Energy Association, to give his presentation, because you are very much required for the sustainability, which is the main plea of any of the planning that we are going to do.
Indeed, yes. Thank you very much. And I think there's some real crossovers, actually, particularly on energy storage. If I may, can I share my screen? Is that okay? I've got some slides. Let's see if we can get that working. Hopefully you can see those, perhaps. Is that there? Can you? Oh, I'm not pressing the right button. Hold on. Is that you can see my slides, yeah? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so my name's Alex Campbell. I work for the International Hydropower Association. What I thought I'd do is give you a very quick introduction to who we are, so you know who we are, then talk a little bit about what hydropower is doing for grids globally, then some of the key challenges, and I think there's some real crossovers there with valuing storage and the storage ability that hydropower provides to electricity systems, and then some of the real opportunities that there are with hydropower to facilitate the grids of the 21st century. And then if we've got time for some discussion, that'd be great. So if I move my slides on, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So the IHA, we've got over 90 members. We are operational and the members are operational in over 120 countries. It really covers the full breadth of the hydropower supply chain. So from consultants through to equipment manufacturers, all the way up to developers and operators. And we work with a wide range of partners as well. One of our key outputs is our sustainability tools, and these go into a lot of depth and detail in many of the key areas of concern for hydropower stakeholders. So we've worked with NGOs, with international financial institutions and the industry, of course, to really develop a suite of tools which can be used for really in-depth assessments or just some background information for those who are just maybe taking first steps. And I think there's a lot of crossover with other technologies as well. So many of those things, for example, on good governance, are applicable to other technologies, certainly not just hydropower. Hydropower today, there's over 1,300 gigawatts installed of capacity. This is all taken from our hydropower status report. We publish this every year. It's freely available from our website, so please do feel free to take a look and download. We had just over 15 gigawatts added in 2019, and hydropower in total provides just under 16% of the globe's electricity today, which is obviously a significant amount. And that was replaced by coal, for example, it would mean a huge additional amount of carbon emissions. We estimate around 4 billion tons of additional greenhouse gases. So on that pure sustainability metric alone, on greenhouse gas emissions, we think hydropower is extremely important. Diving into the numbers in a little bit more detail, as you can see from the chart there, obviously China is a front runner with over 350 gigawatts installed, but obviously Brazil, US, Canada, and India are major players as well. And as I said before, at 16% of the world's electricity, that is a significant proportion, in fact, well ahead of wind and solar at the moment. But of course, those technologies are growing very rapidly, which is very important for meeting the challenge of climate change. We do need even more hydropower, though. We need more of all the technologies. The International Energy Agency, for example, estimates that the world needs another 850 gigawatts by 2040 if we're to stay on track to meeting the Paris climate change targets. And there is that potential out there. It varies around the world. Asia, Africa, and Latin America have a lot of untapped potential. India is potentially only using 30% of its generating potential at the moment, so there is opportunity for more. So clearly an important thing as we move forward to get more hydropower done in a sustainable way to enable the electricity generation of the future. Or if it's 2020, we couldn't really talk about challenges without talking about COVID. So I'll briefly touch on how hydropower has responded to that. Then I want to look at the key question of valuing the benefits of hydropower. So I guess for hydropower, like many other sectors, these will come as no surprise. We had governments putting programs on hold. We had disruptions to supply chains, social distancing rules coming into play, obviously creating a lot of discomfort in the sector as it did for everybody else. We saw electricity demand plummeting earlier on this year, down in India, down in the EU, even in the US with a more restricted lockdown, with a less restrictive lockdowns, there was a sharp drop in electricity demand. Hydropower, though, in some markets actually generated more in Europe, for example. And this was partly in response to the demands of the electricity grids. So we saw ever-increasing amounts of variable renewables like solar and wind, and technologies like hydropower can play a really important role there in balancing out those grids. And for example, in India, with the nationwide solidarity, I think it was a 9-minute turning off of the lights back in April, that actually imposed quite a lot of quite a burden on the electricity grid, and hydropower played a really important role there in making sure that the lights did actually come back on. We put out a position paper, it's available on our website, with some recommendations for making sure that governments and other policymakers are able to have a green and economically sustainable and resilient recovery. There's some important recommendations in there, and I'd be happy to talk about those in more detail. Now, I talked earlier about the issue of valuing hydropower. So this rather busy slide, the one on the right shows IRENA, that's the International Renewable Energy Agency, their estimation of power generation costs over the last decade. And you'll see the different technologies in the columns at the top. So hydropower is still regarded on a global basis as the cheapest renewable. Now, obviously, in the Indian context in particular, solar is probably ahead of hydropower, and I've heard from Indian stakeholders that certainly solar is extremely competitive in India. But it just goes to show that hydropower is cheap, although probably on a slight upward trend since 2010. But the important point here is it's not just the levelized cost of electricity from that technology. We also need to think about the costs of integrating technologies. So wind and solar obviously only generate when it's windy or when it's sunny, and you need to provide backup on grids in order to make sure that electricity is supplied when the weather isn't appropriate. And to give you an example in a little bit more detail, UK government or earlier this year in August published something, its generation costs report. And this actually tried to put some real numbers on this, trying to say, well, what is the true cost to consumers of these additional integration costs? So using the example of solar, it said that in 2025, it estimated that a utility scale solar plant commissioning would cost £41 sterling per megawatt hour. But the additional costs that consumers would actually pay for things like ancillary grid services, inertia services, these sorts of things, could be as much as £23 a megawatt hour more, which is obviously over 50% more on top. So these costs aren't necessarily talked about that much in the public domain, but they're something we all eventually pay for. Now, hydropower is very good at stepping into that market and making sure that electricity does flow. And the International Energy Agency, in its World Energy Outlook, published just a few weeks ago, talked about the kind of the supreme usefulness of hydropower in meeting demand over the short term, but also the much longer term. We might hear from Nepal later on about how hydropower acts there on a kind of on a seasonal basis to make sure there's a stability of electricity supply. So the really important thing is just pure cost of electricity comparisons aren't really appropriate. We need to think about when electricity is provided and the value it provides at that particular point in time. Worth also saying that hydropower works with hybrids, so it can work with floating PV, for example, and even with batteries. And that picture there is from a site in France, which is currently under trials. So just thinking about the grids of the future and smart systems of the future, obviously we'll need to get all these variable technologies all working together in an efficient and effective way. And there's many ways that hydropower can play a role there. Firstly, you can look at it on the kind of regional level, country to country, and looking at interconnectors. This graph comes from an academic journal from earlier this year, and it looked at integrating solar, wind, and hydro across West Africa. And you can see, I mean, I don't need to go into the detail, but you can see that different countries' renewable resources can complement one another. And ultimately, it can mean that we can have in West Africa, for example, grids powered almost entirely by renewables that don't have to rely on fossil fuels, which is surely a good thing. The real opportunity with respect to modernising the hydropower fleet. So the fleet is quite old compared to other technologies. Hydropower lasts a long time, and more than 400 gigawatts of that 1,300 gigawatts that I talked about earlier is over 40 years old. We did a big study earlier this year with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to really map out opportunities for modernisation in Asia. That's available on the AIIB's website. Some real potential then. And the thing about modernisation, I'll just move on to the next slide, really provides an opportunity to put new infrastructure in place without the big systematic, earthworks and so on that does concern some stakeholders. And with modernisation, you can get much more sophisticated systems and controls in place. In Europe at the moment, there's the X-Flex Hydro project, a consortium of 19 partners, including the IHA, really trying to get really sophisticated IT and the very latest equipment in place so that hydropower can act in kind of response with other technologies to make sure that electricity is there when it's needed, not just, as I said, about providing electricity, on a constant basis, but really responding to fluctuations in the grid caused by those variable renewables. And finally, last point for me, if I may, pumped storage hydropower, sometimes forgotten about. Now, pumped storage hydropower is a little bit different from conventional hydropower. It actually pumps water up a hill when electricity is cheap, and then releases it at times of high demand. So perhaps when it's very sunny or very windy, we pump the water up a hill, and then when it's nighttime or the wind drops, we let the water flow back through, releasing electricity on demand. It's actually extremely well established. We estimate that around 95% of the grid scale storage around the world is in pumped storage hydropower, far exceeding batteries on a kind of grid scale basis. China is a leader, again, as they are with regular hydropower. And we expect significant additions over the next 5 years from China, but also in India, Australia, Israel, and parts of Europe. It's important because, as I said, with an increasing amount of variable renewables, and we've seen, you know, some estimates from the International Energy Body saying we need another 14,000 gigawatts of wind and solar, which is a huge number. If, you know, if we're talking about hydropower today is 1,300 gigawatts, and you know, so that's a factor of 10 more just for new technologies. It's obviously a huge amount. But balancing those on grids is going to be critically important. At the moment, it's not so much of a concern because we've still got plenty of gas and coal thermal backup and hydropower. As we take gas and thermal off the grid, we need that instantaneous response. And then the response over slightly longer timeframes, which isn't so well suited for batteries, but is certainly the role of pumped storage hydropower. You might ask, well, what's the problem here if it's such a well-established technology? I think what we found is that in the past, it was developed by vertically integrated utilities who could see the value across all those services. When you start to break electricity markets up, then developers have to do what's called revenue stacking and look to each different service that they can offer. And they obviously need the long-term contracts and the certainty in order to make those investments. And we're seeing in many parts of the world that isn't quite there. So we know this technology provides value to the system overall, but it's not being properly valued at the moment in many markets. So to try and resolve that, we've been working with many countries and international partners with a secretariat for something called the Pumped Storage Hydropower Forum, Pumped Storage Hydropower International Forum, sorry. India is a participant in that, kindly supported by the US and many other countries. And the idea is to do a lot of work this year and then come back in September, October next year with some real firm recommendations for policymakers to make sure that the markets and the policies that are in place are able to support this invaluable technology to make sure that we can properly integrate all those services and then provide electricity as and when needed. And I think that's the last one from me. There's just a reminder of our partners and our member organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Excellent, this hydropower and the pumped energy storage. We are also working on, many people are working on the floating solar over the hydro dams. You know, that can give a very complementary thing for the power, because solar is certainly not the steady power, it's fluctuating. So if you take care and use the already existing transmission system, then it can be a very win-win situation. Thank you for your presentation. Now, I would request Mr. Dhital. I had seen Mr. Ramprasad Dhital there from the, yes. Mr. Dhital.
Yes, I'm
from Nepal Electricity Regulatory Commission. And we are looking forward for your presentation because you are working on the policies, on strategies, and please have your presentation and let us.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Anil, for inviting me to speak in this very important gathering. Let me share my slide. Well, just a moment. Great. I will be, I'll be sharing my, ideas basically in 4 parts. I'll be very brief in introducing the context, current state of electricity, then market structures, then electricity regulation. This Electricity Regulatory Commission has been in operation very recently. It's been a little more than 1 year since we've started our work. So I will introduce our work, how our effort will actually address some of the challenges that are being, that are being there in our electricity sector. And I will conclude by, pointing some of our ideas, what needs to be done to make the whole sector sustainable in the long run. Let me begin by highlighting the current state of electricity. I mean, in the left side, in 2019, our total electrical energy available in 2019 was about 7,600 gigawatt hour. Out of this, 39% was generated from the local independent power producers. These independent power producers are some of them are local, some are our foreign investors also. 39% was generated from the state-owned utility. Basically, we have one vertically integrated utility. So this share is almost 50-50, and 22% of our total energy was actually this was import from India. If you see down there, 1.3 gigawatt was the installed capacity last year, and the peak demand was about 1.4 gigawatt. We are hydro-based. 96% of our generation is actually from hydro. Only 2% comes from solar. 20 gigawatts, plants are in different stages. Private sectors have, or independent power producers have got license for about 20 gigawatt. This includes 0.5 gigawatt for solar. We have 8.4 gigawatt of projects at different stages of project cycle. Again, this includes a very little solar. In terms of access, close to 90% of the people, households have got access to electricity. This includes 86% from grid and 4% from off grid, basically from micro hydro and solar, rooftop solar. 10% people living in rural and remote area, they are yet to get electricity. Our plan is to generate 15 gigawatt by 2028. In the right-hand side, in the total energy mix, the electricity contributes around 4% only, even though we claim that we are rich in hydro resources. We've got around 42 gigawatt, techno-economically feasible projects we could generate from hydro. We also have solar and wind. In terms of the commitment from the government, I mean, our whole idea is to diversify our generation mix, basically to enhance energy security. As I was mentioning, our plan is to generate 15 gigawatt by 2028. So how do we do this? By generating, 30 to 35%. We expect that the project will be generated, or electricity will be generated from reservoir storage projects, 25 to 30% from peaking run-of river type projects, but mostly 30 to 35% projects, the electricity will be generated from run-of river type projects. And non-hydro renewables, basically solar and wind, we expect that in the total energy mix, it will be around 5 to 10%. The whole idea, again, is to increase the energy consumption pattern. At the moment, we have about 300 unit per capita. We expect this to be increased by 700 by 2023, and then 1,500 by 2028. The focus from the government side is to actually promote electricity-based transport, basically electric vehicles. Many charging stations are being structured. We have a dedicated, tariff for electric vehicle, and to increase the, residential load, we also plan to promote electric cooking in a big way. To meet the target of sustainable development goal number 7, which is to provide affordable, adequate, and reliable supply of electricity for all by 2030, we'll be needing around 2.5 billion US dollar, 260 billion Nepalese rupees per year we need to invest. This is a huge amount. Our government, the public sector funding is about 40%. The rest has to be mobilized from the private sectors and international agencies. In terms of the the market in the policy making, we have 3 tier of government: the central, the provincial, and local government. Central government is responsible for making policy, but at the same time, since provincial and local governments, they are also kind of they are given responsibility of making policy. That also depends on the project size. For example, if the project is less than 3 megawatt, so the responsibility is with the local government, whereas up to 20 megawatt, the provincial government takes the lead in making policy, whereas the project above than 20 megawatt, so this is the responsibility of the central government. Regulatory commissions, we have the Central Regulatory Electricity Regulatory Commissions recently established. System operators, the state-owned utility. For generation also, we have, as you can see, the 3 different boxes. In Nepal Electricity Authority is the state-owned utility. It has also many subsidiaries companies. Government has two subsidiaries companies, one for the generations, Vidut Utpadan Company Limited, and another one is for Investment Company Limited. So these are responsible for generations. We have independent power producers, both the local and internationals, and we import from India. Transmission, again, is the responsibility of the state-owned utility. The government also has established very recently form a company, Rashtriya Grid Prasaran Company, basically to operate the very high voltage systems. Distribution, again, the state-owned utility. We have Butol Power Company, a small one, but as you can see, in all fronts, generation, transmission, distribution, system operations. So the state-owned utility is the main one. Here, this slide is, as you can see, as I was mentioning, the vertically integrated utility is responsible for generation, transmission, distribution, and system operators. 2 wing, as you can see in the left, the NEA and other subsidiaries, whereas independent power producers and import. Being the single off-taker, so any state-owned utility has to buy power from its own subsidiary as well as the independent power producers. So the consumers gets support or service from the state utility only. So in this context, few questions there. So how to establish a pricing mechanism that will provide incentive to investors as well as protect consumers' right? This is one of the key challenges that we need to address. Another one is so the vertically integrated utility is there for every role, including buying power from its own subsidiary as well as independent power producers. So how to ensure level playing field for all electricity operators? This is another challenge. How to ensure reliability and security of supply? Since I own everything, then what if I don't provide 24-hour supply? So how do I be penalized? How to monitor service quality and ensure that consumers get value for their service? If I pay $5, whether my tariff will be will be actually adequate to get the service that the utility is providing. So who will be monitoring all those things? And another one is how to develop a competitive electricity market out of an existing monopolistic nature of the utility. So these are the key questions that the regulator has to answer. So that's why we think for us this is an opportunity to actually protect stakeholders' interest, not only consumers' interest, but we are here to actually support governments to protect their interest, protect investors' interest, and of course the consumers' interest. Consumer protection is our key role. So that's why everybody thought of creating an independent regulator. So based on the Electricity Regulatory Commission Act, which was approved in 2017 by Parliament. So our commission has been in operation since May 2019. the whole idea is to regulate the generation, transmission, distribution, and trade. So how do we do this? By making simple process. The key thing, one is we need to be transparent, we need to be systematic, we need to be professional, we need to be credible. Otherwise, there will be again hue and cry. So how do we do this? We actually develop or issue, we develop, prepare standards, guidelines, code, and then enforce this technical thing. Another one is to regulate in economic front, the generation tariff, the transmission tariff, distribution tariff, and the trade tariff. Another one is to actually enable market environment and protect consumers and investors' right. The fourth one is related to institutional, governance, organization development, capacity enhancement, and the whole idea again is to improve this sector governance. If dispute arises between two licensees or between user, consumer, and the utility, so our job is to actually resolve the first, and then if they are not happy with our decision, they will go to court, Supreme Court. And the final one is to support, advise government in issues related to electricity generation, transmission, distribution, and trade. When our aim is to actually ensure, consumers receive a service of good quality at fair price, efficient service provider. Basically, the utility should be able to earn sufficient revenue, so that they will have sufficient fund for the refinancing. The staff will be motivated. This should be also very strong. Utility investors' investment is protected. We make sure that your investment is in the right sector. Consumers' rights are protected, and generation, transmission, distribution systems are developed as per international standard. Since we will be connecting our network to India, so that our system has to be compatible with our systems. This also includes providing equal access to to everybody, basically the power generators and the transmission company utility, so that there should not be any discrepancy or debate. Fair and competitive process for issuing licenses. This has been one of the issues. So far, if I want to get license, I just prepare a small pre-feasibility study report, submit the document to the department, and get the license easily. And then I'll just hold the whole river streams. So that provision has also the traders, the traders can just sell their license and then make money. Instead of building power plant, actually you trade the license. So this practice has to be actually stopped, and the grid code and everything has to be synchronized with our regional and neighbors grid. So that
Please.
Sorry, something went wrong. Am I audible now? Oh, yes. Oh,
yes, you. Please go ahead.
Let me share again. I'm sorry. I'll share my slide again. Sorry. Yeah. So how do we establish pricing mechanism then? And that was my point. So there again, two things. One is the rate, electricity tariff, generation, transmission, distribution, and trade tariff. Another one is when you develop tariff, but you also need to develop the power purchase agreement, the clause, and the terms and conditions in the agreement between off-taker and the project developer. So in the under the tariff, feasible tariff we need to determine the feasible tariff model. So our approach is to develop cost-reflective tariff in the beginning, tariff for generations, transmission, and distributions. But how do you do this? This is another challenge for us, right? So we are asking utility to develop cost of service study, and then based on this, we are also planning to develop key performance indicators. So those who perform good, they will be rewarded. The performance, if the performance is bad, then the incentive, they will be penalized. So performance based incentive mechanism, right? But again, we need to develop baseline. So we are now relying on our Bhutan and in India's hydropower, Uttarakhand, Himachal's, the rate, especially to establish the benchmark for our, project generations. And then regarding the consumer tariff, we actually set a deadline, multi-year tariff or 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. So once you have a very clear guideline, then we actually, can easily introduce the consumer tariff. Under the power purchase agreement, especially the proper assessment of construction and operational risk. So what happened especially in our part of the world, you sign PPA because PPAs, the rates are posted, the fixed rate, and then your cost will be inflated. But because of the delays, it could be due to, for example, earthquake or COVID, and the cost will be very high. And the project now, during the project approval, project becomes very attractive, but over the period, the projects will be unattractive. I mean, project will not be able to generate sufficient revenue for operation, maintenance, and repayment of the loan. So this has been one of the issues. So that's why we need to assess the risk. And then only we should, allow, utility to sign PPA with the developer. Next. Oh, sorry. I don't know why I cannot. Sorry.
No, I think you
Something
can.
wrong. I cannot.
Okay, you can speak and conclude.
Sure. Sorry. Nah, I think, okay. Then fine. Another thing is under economic regulations, well, we will be developing all those technical sides. The market, how to establish competitive market. This is another thing that we need to, develop there. We need to do a kind of market-based power sector reform, and need to provide non-discriminatory provision for the use of transmission facilities, transmission distribution facilities for, project developer as well as the consumer. Then the final one is basically, I just would like to, share a few things here. In the COVID, what we observed in the regulatory commission, utilities revenue has dropped significantly. 30% revenue has been reduced, and because of the lockdown industries, their demand also has been reduced. So there, they are now asking us to approve their cost. So in the middle of the fiscal year, we are now having difficulties in assessing or approving their projects. Now we are recommending them. Okay, what is the exact impact? How do you quantify this? As Alex was also mentioning, during his presentation also. So this quantification, and then, since regulator has to approve their cost, it has to be, again, the consumer has to pay. So their assessment, especially the impact due to COVID and earthquake and other things that we need to assess. Another thing is, what if the price, electricity consumer price is reduced, but whether the reduction in tariff will increase the revenue, increase the consumption. So another thing, especially the conduct a study on price and income elasticity of demand. So this is another thing that we are now looking at. And then the since we're very new, our approach is to adopt a kind of light-handed regulatory approach to accommodate the issues. That's why for those small hydro projects, developer will also relax few clauses. You need to declare energy, but because of the hydrology, your generations will be low, but this will be will not be penalize you. So that kind of few relaxation. In case of solar, we have net metering rule. I mean feed-in tariff, but the rate is again is posted rate. So this has we have made these provisions basically to attract investors to invest in small and renewable energy projects also. The idea is again to diversify our generations. So this much from my side. I could not share you my all slides, but yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
If you
Tita.
have any questions, please, I'll be happy to, respond.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Tita. And where you are in the steep ladder of development at this moment, you have the opportunity to do a very sustainable planning, and that's the smart planning. Thank you. Dr. Garg, if you unmute.
Dr. Bandyopadhyay sir,
Yes.
Dr. Wolfgang is from Chicago, Michigan, and it is morning there itself. So kindly give him a chance so that he can present his address, because basically he was to give video presentation, but now he is here, so we should take this opportunity.
Oh, sure. Welcome, Dr. Power. And I do not have the introduction of you. You can introduce yourself before making the presentation. And Professor Rihan has also a slot here.
I am.
Unmute, please, Dr. Garg, unmute.
First, Dr. Wolfgang.
Yes, he has also a presentation.
Yeah.
So, and our time limit is 7:30, means still
Okay.
25 minutes. So
Yeah.
Let us try to finish these two presentations in the given slot. Welcome, Mr.
Dr.
Bob.
Wolf.
Please.
So let me share my screen. I would like to talk a little bit about my university, Michigan State University. I'm a professor there, and we have engaged in a project to model ourselves as the smart city of the future. What do I mean with that? But I'll start with some general things to consider. First of all, energy is money. I say that in all my public presentations, but it's something that also experts need to consider. The second is that environmental sustainability must also mean fiscal sustainability. If energy is money and it costs more to deploy green energy, then you're wasting not only money, but you're also wasting energy. So energy conservation properly done pays for itself, and the greenest energy is the energy we don't consume. Now, renewables, we heard about hydro, of course, and solar and wind. They use free fuel, which is almost inexhaustible. Currently, we get about 5,000 times the solar radiation than all of human demand is combined. We saw in the previous session a graph where the solar array was, a potential solar array was overlaid over the map of the Sahara Desert. That was slightly too optimistic, but the basic truth still holds. We have much more energy that the sun provides for us than what we need. And this is a world map of the solar radiation time averaged. And you can see On any point of the Earth, the range is between maybe 150 and 250 watt per square meter. That's time averaged what reaches the ground at horizontal orientation. And of course, we're located where my arrow is there. So not as good as India, not as good as Nepal, but still quite useful. The drawback of renewables is that they're intermittent, and so energy storage is essential. Batteries, of course, pumped hydro, we heard in Mr. Campbell's talk. And I just want to give an example from my home state of Michigan, which is this. It's the Ludington Pump Storage Facility. And what you see here is a power station that is basically a hydropower station. Oops. That pumps water up from Lake Michigan to a reservoir that holds up to 20 gigawatt hours of energy that can be deployed. And this is
I think I'm only seeing the front slide. I don't know about others, but it's not on the other slides for me.
Right.
It's just your title slide.
Oh, okay.
Can you not see this?
I can just see your introductory screen. I don't know about anybody else.
I think you're sharing. Yeah, now we can see it.
Yeah.
So maybe this doesn't work. Can you see the pump storage station now?
Yeah, I think it's not in presenter mode. I think it's just in,
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, the presenter mode you weren't able to see, so we'll continue like this. And
Okay.
so this is what you see here. Can you see my cursor that moves over? What you see here is this 1 gigawatt power station. It's actually 2.17 gigawatt total they're presently renovating. And the reservoir holds 20 gigawatt hours of energy. So my university is the largest university in the state of Michigan. It has over 50,000 students. It's a member of the AAU, the American Association of Universities. It's a top 100 university in the world as ranked by many global rankings. It has it's a land-grant university. It has a 21 square kilometer contiguous campus, and it's a living learning lab with its own power plant and microgrid. So it's a smart city. I divided our campus map in different traffic areas with a high density urban area with huge pedestrian volumes. There's suburban areas with golf courses. There's an industrial area and a rural area with our farms. So this is an ideal testing ground for connected automated vehicles. We provide vastly different driving conditions during all seasons. Very importantly, we have our own police force, so we can provide road closures within a few hours' notice without a public hearing. We have traffic intersections that are equipped with cameras and roadside units that communicate to smart vehicles the status of the intersection, which was previously mentioned in the talk here. And we're an automated bus consortium testing site. That's a US consortium where we try to advance fully self-driving electric buses.
Professor,
also
are you showing your slides? Actually, we're unable to see for the slides.
Can you see the smart city slide that's showing right now?
It's being cut off. It's cut off to the left.
We are seeing slide number 6.
Okay, we'll try this. Can you see it now?
No.
It's cut off. It's cut off to the left. Yeah,
Yes, now it has come.
Okay. It's kind of interesting. I've never had this trouble, but you know, there's always something new. So this is an ideal testing ground also for smart microgrid technology. We have our own power plant on campus and our own water system, both fresh water. We pump water out of the aquifer that's under the university, and wastewater facilities. So it's a model for a smart city of the future. In 2015, in 2012, I'm sorry, we decided, and I was one of the principal authors, that we needed an energy transition plan to go to 100% renewable energy and move away from what was then a coal-fired power plant. And so we have energy targets that are listed on the side here. We have a huge array of sustainability and renewable energy projects. I will not go into all of them and just mention one because of time constraints, which is the solar array. So these solar panels are becoming more and more efficient and cheaper. This graph shows this. There has been a price decay even over the last decade by a factor of 4 in small and large solar installations. And we just heard about this instrument of power purchase agreements. We have actually used exactly this because a solar array costs, at least of the scale that I'm envisioning, 10, 20, 30 million dollars. And when I go to our president and say, I need this kind of money, but the provost is there and says, I need a new building, have a guess who wins. So we were able to get solar power at no initial cost through this power purchase agreement. And that gives also price certainty for the next 25, 30 years. So you can see our solar arrays from space. This is a picture of a part of our campus with a lot of the athletic and teaching buildings and dormitories. But you can also see these solar arrays that I highlight in yellow here. And from the ground level, they look like this. We decided to put them over parking spots, 5,000 of them. So they cover 45 acres of parking lots. We use 40,000 solar panels, each of 300 watt, which gives you a 13.4 megawatt DC power and 10.5 megawatt alternating current after the inverters. For the year, that means 15,000 megawatt hours of solar energy. Since we have a fixed price, this will save the university $10 million in electricity costs over the next 25 years. And it proves that green power is now cheaper than brown power. This array was finished at the end of 2017. It provides 18% of MSU's peak power demand. It's the largest solar carport array in North America, and I believe the entire world, but we don't have data for everywhere. At night, we have LED lighting that is occupant sensitive, so when you walk around, it always lights around you. We have just signed a contract this month for the next MSU solar array. It will be 20 megawatt, twice the size, and then we'll have over 50% of our peak demand satisfied just from solar alone. So this is a picture of the farms on our south campus, and we will use 100 acres of basically meadows that are used for sheep grazing right now to build this solar array. The sheep can still continue to graze under the array, and we will also install a wildflower and pollinator habitat. So this will last all through next year, the construction of this facility. I want to give you a feeling for the importance of this in terms of emission of CO2 from our university. So in 2006, we've had almost 600,000 metric tons of CO2 emitted from our university through our power production in our own power plant. We switched fuel away from coal into natural gas and burning of biomass. And that fuel switch resulted in this reduction by more than 200,000 tons. We implemented an anaerobic digester for animal waste and cafeteria food waste, and that further shifted it down. This is the solar carport effect. We just last month started a new power plant based on reciprocating internal combustion engines. And that higher efficiency immediately translates in additional savings And that new 20 megawatt solar array will further push us down to around 200,000 tons. So even though we have grown in square footage for our buildings tremendously over the last decade and a half, we have reduced our carbon emission by 2/3. If you put that in terms of trees, this means that it's the equivalent of planting 800,000 new trees each year in terms of CO2 savings. And finally, we're also saving in costs. So in fiscal year 2014, our energy costs for our purchased raw materials that we need to spend to generate our electricity and heat was 34 or almost $35 million. And in the last fiscal year, it was reduced to $23 million. This year, of course, it will be significantly lower still because of stay-at-home orders. I'm working from my home office right now, as you can see. And so the university consumes much less energy, but this is an aberration. What I show you here is actual savings due to switching from fossil fuels to energy conservation and renewables. So again, this is one of my main points. True sustainability needs to not just save fossil fuel burning and carbon emission, but it also needs to save money, and we're doing this. So this new solar array will save an additional $50 million during the next 25 years. So I know we're short of time, so let me end right there. My contact info is listed here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Professor Bauer. It's a good thing that we know about the planning of the university. Now, may I request Professor Rihan, please introduce yourself. I do not have the...
Thank you, Dr. Bandyopadhyay. I am professor in Aligarh Muslim University, the Central University near Delhi. And I thank you for having me in this session. I thank Dr. Anil for inviting me here, and I thank you for chairing and coordinating this session in such a good way. So I know I'm really short of time, so I'm quickly coming to what I want to talk. I'll share my screen, but I hope it is visible. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So since I'm really short of time, what I'll do, I'll not talk about general terms, and my co-panelists have already talked many of the things which I wanted to talk, and in fact, my colleague professor from Michigan State University has already talked on many things. So what I'll do, I'll quickly go to what we have experienced and some of the important lessons. So I believe there is a common link between a smart grid and the smart city, and that is the green energy. And green energy, there are many options, but particularly for Indian climate, the solar energy is the most suitable one. So at national level, we have a national solar mission in which we are trying to install 175 gigawatt of renewable energy. Out of that, 100 gigawatt is to be from solar. And we also have a national smart grid mission. So we are giving high importance to both these developments. So now I'm coming to what our experience related to this green energy is. And I agree with the professor that large universities are like cities in itself. So similarly, our university is also fairly large university. We have around 35,000 people in the campus, including staff and students, and a large campus here. So what we did, we experimented with this solar energy system. And now for about 4 years, we are having these plants, 6.5 megawatt capacity, which is the largest capacity of renewable energy in any academic institute in India. So as you have said, Professor, we too agree to that. What we have observed, we have saved money as well as we have contributed to CO2 saving also. So 27,000 units a day we are generating from these plants, and we have contributed to CO2 saving as well as financial savings. And almost 25% of total consumption, that is 24-hour consumption, we are feeding through these plants. So based on 4 years of our experience, what I believe are the important challenges or the areas which we need to look at, this I have included. This is one of our 3.3 megawatt solar farm in the campus. It is a centralized farm having around 11,000 solar panels in it. And then we have almost 40 installations like this where rooftop plants are there, including few parking plants in parking also. So I'm very quickly, I am sharing the important observations which we find are the challenges, or we can call opportunities also. One thing is this, you see, when we have a grid connected plant, if our plant is generating less than our requirement, then of course we withdraw from the grid. But when we are generating more than the requirement, then it has to be transport to the grid, export to the grid. Now, the issue is that under net metering system, you get benefits for that. But somehow the grid managers are now trying to minimize the export of energy from the consumer side. So initially, net metering was allowed for every category of consumers in the country, but now it is restricted to residential and agriculture only. So in the campus, what happens and you see in North India, we have a huge variation in weather. So there are some months when we consume around 30,000 units per day during sunshine hours. And there are some months where we go up to 60,000 to 65,000 units during sunshine hours. So what happens, if we plan for 30,000 period, then some of the months are there, 4 or 5 months, where we are not able to take benefit of solar energy. If we plan for 30,000 units, then of course, and if we plan for 60,000 units, then of course, many months we are wasting our generation because we are not getting any benefit out of that. So in this context, I believe this concept of transactive energy, where peer-to-peer exchange of energy is going to happen, is an absolutely critical and essential experiment which we should do. And this is good that in our state already UP government has started a pilot project. So blockchain and some other technologies, I believe they are going to play a critical role, and we should explore the utilization of this technique. Second thing which we have observed is that, for example, we are a campus, but already we have around 43 plants in the campus, generation plants. So you see the maintenance, when you have a smart city, now in Indian smart cities, the expectation is that at least 80% households should have rooftop solar panels. So for any utility, the maintenance and monitoring will become a challenge. So we need to utilize this artificial intelligence techniques and other related techniques to monitor and manage the plants. This is another important thing. Third point which we have observed is, for example, as I have mentioned, our campus, there is such a huge variation in consumption from some months to some other months in the year. So that means the forecasting is very crucial. So conventionally, we were forecasting only loads, and the generation forecasting was there, but not that kind of real time. So now we need to focus on advanced forecasting for generation as well as load. So again, the role of AI is coming to play a big role. And there is a good development in India. We have started 11 renewable energy management centers recently. There, this feature is they are trying. Through these, we are monitoring 55 gigawatt of solar and wind power. Then the next point which we have observed is the data volume. You see, as the number of plants is increasing, basically the grid is a smart grid is evolving in the form of a mixed grid. There is a mix of resources that some conventional is there, then green energy sources are there, but there is a mix of central as well as distributed plants. So as the distribution is increasing, this is giving us a lot of data. The data volume is increasing, and we need to analyze data analytics techniques, big data, cloud computing and all to better manage these plants. And you see, apart from this, smart metering is an integral part of smart grid. Then PMU based monitoring has also come up in a big way, and it will be an integral part of a smart grid. Both these are also contributing to huge volume of data. So what I believe is that we need to have more utilization of these techniques, and to really achieve a smarter grid and take full benefit from these renewable and green sources of energy. So this is what I wanted to share, and in view of the time limit, I am stopping here, and if any questions are there, I'll be happy to answer the questions also.
Thank you, Professor Rehan. We understand that Aligarh Muslim University is the university which is using the maximum solar power. And
one more thing, just one point. During these projects, Dr. Vivek, I'm thankful to you. You have been a constant support of advice and encouragement. When we were implementing, I had interaction 2-3 times with you on solar projects also.
Thank you. Dr. Garg, it is now 7:30.
Yeah.
Would you like to invite any question, or we can close it because of the time?
There is no question, and we have to thank Chair Dr. Vivek Bandyopadhyay for ably chairing this session, and we have to thank Dr. Ravi, Professor Ravi, and Alex, and Dr. Wolfgang and Dr. Muhammad Rehan for excellent presentation. And we will have next conference next year in August 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Hopefully it is live and maybe hybrid. So we will invite you for that, and hopefully things will improve by that time. So I will take a minute also, because I have to address vote of thanks to both the halls. In other hall, World Water Summit is running, so it is going to finish, and just wait for a minute, and I will just address simultaneously. This is a very difficult task to finish both the session in both the conferences at same time. Okay, so just wait for a minute.
Thank you, Dr. Garg, and I convey my regards and thanks to all the panelists. Thank you for participation, and thank you, Dr. Garg, for the organization. Thank you all.
Thank you both very much as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Okay. It's nice, Dr. Ravi. Whenever you are here, if you let us know.
I'm sure. Like I said, I've worked with the India Smart Grid Forum. I sit on the board of one of the L&T subsidiaries, and I'm also with the India Energy Storage Association, one of whom you honored yesterday, Dr. Rahul Valavalkar.
With Rahul.
Yes. So there are
Yes,
5 or
I've
6
been
such
working
connections.
with Rahul for quite some time.
Okay.
And where are you? You are in Toronto?
Yes, I am based out of Toronto. Yes.
Toronto. Okay. And Professor Bauer, so nice that in Michigan University you are really doing is it the zero energy campus?
Well, we're trying to get there. By 2050, I hope we will be there. Right now we're on the path that we have set in 2012. So we have met our emissions targets. With the new 20 megawatt solar array, we will meet our generation target of over 50% peak electricity. We have the problem in general that 2/3 of our energy units that we're importing into our campus has to go into heating of the buildings over the very cold winters. Right now it's below freezing here. And so we have looked into geothermal approaches where you drill, 300, 400 meter deep holes into the ground, you pump water in, and then it equilibrates. You get 10 degrees Celsius water out with which you can heat pump the heating needs in the winter and which you can cool in the summer. And so that's going to be our next big project. But right now it's still too expensive. All these renewable technologies get better and better price points. Batteries, for example.
Dr. Wolfgang,
yes,
I have to address both the halls, both the conference simultaneously. So with your blessing and support, we can give vote of thanks to all the participants and all chairpersons and all others. So this is vote of thanks from Dr. Garg, Anil Garg. I have to thank the participants of World Renewable Energy and World Water Summit at the same time. Your presence is a must, and without your presence, there is no conference. Dear speakers, respected distinguished speakers, and chairperson, you have done a wonderful, commendable job. I have to thank especially those from Canada, Ravi, Satpati, and Dr. Wolfgang, who is having morning in USA, Michigan at this time, and Dr. Campbell from UK is a different time there. So there are delegates, speakers from Germany and other part of world, Italy. So I have to thank especially for them. And we have to thank Ministry of Jal Shakti, Ministry of MNRE, Niti Aayog for their support. Secretary Jal Shakti was here in the morning. I have to thank Mr. UP Singh especially. I have to thank Mr. Anil Rajdan, former Secretary Power and Chairman Energy and Environment Foundation for their guidance, entire support, and for his valuable time and advice for chairing the sessions and giving us motivation. We have to thank Dr. V.K. Garg. We have to thank Dr. Vivek Bandyopadhyay for selecting the awardees. We have to congratulate winner of the awards, Energy and Environment Global Awards in water sector as well as an energy and environment sector. We have to thank sponsors, especially the Sun Source Energy, PFC, NTPC, Oil India for their support. We have to thank Chairperson of Raga Integrated Technology Management Services, who happened to be my wife, Ragnigar, and without her support, we cannot do anything. Then we have to thank doctors, Pratyusha, Dr. Sargam, and Pragyan from California, dear Taruna, and Shubham Garg, who is here, and he has spent a lot of time here and just conducting the World Water Summit coordination. I have to thank Aishwarya, who is a compare for her excellent work. We have to thank Puneet, and Uttam for their support, Virtual MNC for their conducting this virtual conference. We have to thank all the participants once again for their support. Again, we will meet in August 2021, hopefully live, but if things will not improve, which I am sure it will improve, then it can be hybrid also, virtual plus live. Then for your information, the registration of delegate 514, then auditorium 806, and visitor 1262. They have participated in both the two virtual conferences. And thank you very much for your support, for your cooperation, and we will meet in 2021 in August 21st to 23rd. This was the exact date every year except this time. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you,
Bye.
sir. Thank you, Dr. Satpathy. We will cooperate in a
Another
big way.
excellent conference.
Yeah.
Thank you for another excellent conference. This was
Yeah.
very challenging. You did a fantastic job.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Pati, and for all the speakers for excellent cooperation and support. We will meet in 2021, August. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Amita. Yeah. Dr. V.K. Jain, thank you. Dr. Sherwani, thank you very much. And Mr. Pati, Chairperson, Central Groundwater Board, thank you very much. And thank you, Shubham. Thank you, Dr. Jain. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you, Shubham. Excellent work done. Thank you.